So good day and welcome to Mindful Trinity. Good day to our viewers. I'm so honored and I'm quite blessed to be joined by one of our first guests on Mindful Trinity. I'll tell you more about her um, in a short while. But in fact, she was actually my first guest when I decided to do go this route and do interviews and podcasting and all of that. At that time, I had no idea what is podcasting, but I took the leap of faith and I went into it. Our special guest for today is a corporate wellness provider. She's a mindset coach, a yoga teacher. She runs virtual customized multi-level corporate wellness programs designed to support mental and physical wellness. She's a certified yoga teacher, and she also applies the principles and tools of yoga to support the employees in cultivating wellness. So, Courtney Johannesen is from New York, USA, and she's here to speak to us about bringing wellness in the workplace. So, welcome, Courtney. I'm so grateful that you are here. I know it's still morning in America at the moment. Here, it's actually afternoon. So, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be back again and chat with you. So wonderful
Yeah.
to be here.
Yes, remember the first time we actually started this, it was live and doing something live for the first time. I know I had lots of nerves. I'm not sure how you felt at that time, but we've come a
Yes,
long way.
absolutely. Yes, those live talks were, they were wonderful in the beginning to start to connect with people who were, in those lockdown conditions. And I think that's really what we were addressing in our talk was how we can manage all of that sudden stress that was coming up. And I think, these virtual platforms have really been wonderful to be able to connect together and share this valuable information with people. So it's great to be here again.
Yeah, that's so true. I've also experienced in my own lifestyle, even though I'm a yoga teacher, but we also go through stress and burnout at times. I know today was such a stressful day for me, not in a sense whereby I was actually stressing myself. There was so much for me to do, and I tried to organize myself. And sometimes, even things that's not planned actually happens in the day. So we always have to keep an open mind and go with the flow. That's what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. How sometimes we give ourselves our own stress.
Mm,
And it can come when we get overwhelmed. We feel like our to-do lists are just so long, and it starts to feel like things are out of control. And, even as yoga teachers and practitioners, we are not immune to this stress. And I think it's important to acknowledge that because I think sometimes people might see yoga teachers as having everything all together.
true.
And, it is not that way all the time.
Mm,
But we are fortunate to have those tools in our toolkit to know how to regulate our stress so that it doesn't spin out of control and we can come back and get recentered and refocused.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
the beauty
Absolutely.
of yoga and wellness.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want my viewers, my listeners to actually get to know you more as well. Could you tell us more about your organization firstly, and also tell us about Courtney Johannesen, um, and what led you to start such an organization?
Absolutely. Well, I'm very passionate about supporting people with wellness and even more specifically with mental and emotional wellness. So, in my work with workplaces and clients, we really focus on how to cultivate work and life balance, cultivating self care, and building a resilient mindset so that stress can be managed well and in positive ways. Stress is just so important or managing stress rather, is so important to our health. And there's a very big mindset component to that. So, in our mind and our thoughts, stress can become overwhelming. And it's important to have those tools, like I mentioned, to come back to feeling connected to ourselves and keep our stress in perspective. So, in my work and in my life, I really focus on applying the principles and tools of yoga to daily life kind of like a well-being toolkit to help people create a fulfilled and meaningful life. And I've seen the impact of that in my life. So that's what I want to give and share with others.
Yeah, and it's so much needed in this day and age, especially during this time as well. We see stress just coming up over and over again. And also, I also believe if we do not learn from these lessons, it will keep on repeating itself until we learn from it and try to better ourselves. Stress,
Absolutely.
I mean, you know what, stress is always going to be there. But if we do not learn from it and try to use it as a stepping stone to reach whatever goal we're actually trying to, but make it realistic as well, so you don't stress yourself out.
Definitely. And, one thing I'm seeing with a lot of my clients is that past stressful situations are starting to resurface more during this time. So that's a bit of a signal that maybe those situations were not fully resolved before or have been triggered in some way. And so, really being able to work with those emotional experiences is important. And a lot of times they are difficult situations that are hard to accept and acknowledge, but we can do so in healthy, positive ways so that these difficult feelings and emotions don't take over completely. I think that as people are encountering stress in so many ways during this time, being able to handle what's coming up and try to not resist it, even though it might not feel so good, is really an important key in that healing process. Being able to look at those feelings, look at those emotions and thoughts, and investigate them in a way that is curious and compassionate to yourself without being judgmental and very hard on yourself. And I think, when we get into that judgmental realm, that's where some of the difficult thought spirals can just continue because we think, why am I feeling this way? And I don't want to be in this place.
Mm-hmm.
But when we can touch into kindness and compassion, we're more able to understand our thoughts better and maybe see that, our mind is trying to protect us and save us from stress and pain. And there's things that we can do to work through that in healthy ways. So really trying to acknowledge what's coming up. And sometimes that means seeking out outside guidance and support to be able to do so in a way that feels comfortable.
I actually like that. I also read a quote not very long ago, and I grew to actually apply this quote into my own life. It's actually from the Bhagavad Gita. It's one of these ancient texts. I'm not sure whether you're familiarized with it. But it basically says your mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So we have to live our life to try to make our mind our best friend because we don't want to be our enemy. I mean, being an enemy with mind is supposed to be, in our bodies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. There's another book title that comes to mind. I forget who the author is, but I think it's called Making Your Mind Your Ally or Turning Your Mind into Your Ally.
Okay.
And, ultimately, that's what we want. We want our mind to be on our side and
Yes.
in our favor, working for us, instead of that inner critic that sometimes comes in and says, we're not doing good enough and, we're not worth enough and worthy. So, really finding ways to create that little bit of mindset shift so that we can become our inner friend and inner guide and step away from that inner critic that's harming us in a way.
Okay. So it's actually International Yoga Day on Monday, in fact. And I think a lot of people, whether it's actually yoga teachers or others that are actually into yoga or starting their journey in yoga, and they want to learn more about yoga itself. I mean, as a yoga teacher yourself, what does yoga mean to you? And how can we apply these practices and tools in this modern age?
Yeah, well, that's a great question because to me, yoga is a way of living.
Mm.
And what people might not realize is that yoga is so much more than the physical movement practice that we might recognize, especially in Western cultures like in the United States where I live. But the entire system of yoga includes principles for living, principles of self-care and collective care, breathing practices that help to enhance our health physically and mentally, different practices about awareness and presence. And everything is focused on helping us to find this place of deep inner connection and harmony.
Mm.
And so if we really dive in, there's a very large set of principles to yoga that can influence our entire way of living and being. And I know I've had, different challenging circumstances in my life where wasn't sure what to do and how to get through it.
Mhm.
But yoga and these principles can be a bit like our guidebook for living.
Mhm.
If we don't know what to do or where to turn, there's different yoga texts and um, principles and tools that can help us handle what has come up and give us the mental clarity to maybe make some difficult decisions or have those difficult conversations.
Yeah, that's very
So,
true.
mhm. And so for me, yoga is applying a lot of this work to our life through the principles and practices more than just the physical movement.
Okay, okay, awesome. So, you know what, I also was in the corporate world not very long ago. It was actually 2018 that I left corporate. And during the years that I spent in corporate, I was most of the time very stressed because we had to meet deadlines. If it wasn't pressure from colleagues or whether it's management or whatever, but you actually need to meet these deadlines. Sometimes you actually don't make time for yourself because you think it's normal and you think stress is normal in the workplace. But now, as a yoga teacher, I've got a mind shift, and well, basically, I did the mind shift, and my
Yeah.
perspective of corporate is totally different to what it was when I was there. And okay, you actually work with a lot with the corporates, and I mean, a lot of them actually, well, a lot of these employees come to you with stress related issues and things like that. How can we create a culture of wellness in the workplace?
I think it begins with the values that the workplace and the company is communicating, but also embodying. So
Mm.
it's one thing to say that, oh, we really value our employees, but how are we showing it?
Mhm.
Embodying it is living it is really the next step and the very critical step, because with just stating it and not putting it into action, there's a disconnect there.
Sure.
But I think, we're working on really valuing the whole person when we speak about wellness in the workplace.
Mhm.
So seeing employees as more than their work and their work effort, but the entire person matters, which includes their life outside of work. And I think a lot of companies are seeing during this time that employees can't work well and be productive if there's all of this other stress weighing on them. And so companies are seeing the importance of becoming more involved with wellness for their employees. And, speaking about these values, I think compassion is very critical. During this time, we're all going through various types of stress, various levels of stress. And so just showing each other that we care beyond our work is really important. We can do that through just being able to listen and being willing to listen to each other.
It's so true.
Being curious about what people have going on in their lives, and maybe asking about coworkers' lives outside of work. How's your garden doing? How's your latest home project? How are your children? How are you doing? How are you feeling with everything going on?
Yeah.
And trying to listen in that same non-judgmental tone that we want to give ourselves. So giving another person that space to be true to themselves and really say what's going on without fearing that you might be judging them. So kind of creating that sense of empathy and empathetic connection where we want to be understood, and so we want to understand each other. Even something as simple as smiling or, asking how someone is doing, asking their opinion can really show someone that we care and we want to include them. We want to know about them.
Yeah. I actually like that, what you mentioned about non-judgmental and being compassionate to your coworker and things like that. When I was in corporate, I actually heard this saying many times that one should not mix the personal life with the work life. And whatever happens in the home, whatever problems that they experience in the home, they should not bring it to work. They need to have both separate. But now you also mentioned that we need to get to know our coworkers on a more personal, on a more personal level. How would you deal with, or how would you address someone that's going through something more stressful at home? And take, for instance, you are actually the employer. And because, we live in a world right now, even though as much as we can say, we have to do things without any judgment, but people still fear being judged. And that is why they don't want to bring whatever problems that they're experiencing at home, the workplace, because of fear of being judged. What if my problems affect my work so much that I may lose my job? Because in South Africa, especially, the unemployment rate is quite high. And due to this old COVID pandemic, it's actually increased even more. So what advice, or how would you deal with something like that?
Well, I think for employers, it's a great time to model the values that we want to embody in our companies. And so the leadership of a company or workplace could start to have some of these discussions and show employees what that could look like and how it could be received. So, maybe if one of the company's leaders is working from home and managing children at home and just kind of struggling with all of these responsibilities, that person could stand up and say, I'm having an off day. Things are a little bit challenging today. And, it's a difficult day right now. So, maybe saying, I'm going to end my work at 5 o'clock sharp and I will not be available for communication later today. Or I'm going to take my lunch break away from the computer and I will not be available during this time.
Okay.
So, I think acknowledging the difficulty and then being able to show what you're going to do about it, or maybe saying you don't know what to do and acknowledging that too. But just letting those struggles be shown a little bit more and using that vulnerability and coming into your courage to step up and show that will start to ripple out into the wider company culture. If employees see that it's okay to show that you're having a difficult day, they'll be a little bit more inclined and hopefully find it easier to have those conversations themselves, even if it's not necessarily with leadership, maybe with other coworkers.
Okay, yeah, absolutely awesome advice. And yes, I do agree with you as well. You just need to be real. You need to, let your employer know how you're feeling and what's happening in your current life, especially now with COVID. I think everyone is affected somehow. Some people are not. I think it's also being true to yourself. You have to be true to yourself in order to recognize these, these mishaps, these issues that we are going through, and is a solution for everything that we go through.
Right. Yeah, being willing to communicate about it. And like you said, that that means being true to yourself and acknowledging that struggle to yourself. I mean, there's no reason to be ashamed other than, well, I mean, what we've been taught is definitely valid, but I think understanding and knowing that many people are in similar struggles can make it a little bit easier. And we never know what someone else is going through. So that person that you'd share with might say, oh my gosh, I feel the same way. And I'm so relieved that you came to tell me and we're willing to talk about it. So it could be an opportunity to foster a really good, strong connection there as well.
Yeah, true. It's support structure. We all need it. We cannot do anything on our own.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you give us some practical ways to overcome burnout? Burnout is actually one of our number one issues at the moment, with especially working from home right now. We all go through it.
Absolutely. And like you said, in times before the pandemic hit, we were going to companies and there was that idea of having more of a work and life boundary. But now with a lot more remote work happening, those boundaries are blurred and kind of not even existent anymore. So work and life are integrated in new ways that they never were before. And so many people are working longer hours and moving into this state of exhaustion and burnout as they're trying to just keep up with everything. So I think really getting clear on your priorities is important for overcoming burnout. And during this time, realizing that priorities might be different. Maybe you have fewer priorities because you're not at your full capacity. And so you just can do less work and take on less. And that's okay. This is, not a permanent situation. There will be a time when things shift. So keeping in mind that if you are doing less and having a lower capacity, it's temporary. So you might look at your monthly priorities, weekly, and even breaking it down to daily so that you're clear on what you need to do each day. And that to-do list is not never ending, but we do have a few specific things that we want to tackle maybe each day or each week, whatever kind of style works for you. I like to do daily, so I know exactly what I need to do. But then I do broaden it out into weekly and monthly to make sure that all of my projects are staying on track the way I would like. We can also look at boundaries when we think about burnout. And boundaries take so many forms, but it's a really key way of protecting our time and our energy. So boundaries will be a little bit different for every person, but thinking about your work hours, your social boundaries, and how you are giving your time and energy away socially, whether it's to family or friends. How many virtual chats and phone calls can you have in a day without completely draining and depleting yourself? Also thinking about media and social media boundaries, maybe trying to reduce our mindless scrolling and getting very clear on when we might check in with the news or social media. Giving yourself a set time or set amount of time can be really helpful. And then also really prioritizing our self-care, to rest, to recharge, and considering self-care in a certain way so that it's not just one more thing to do. So sometimes even incorporating self-care can feel overwhelming because we've already maybe had a full day of taking care of our family. There's just so many things going on. And I like to think of keeping self-care in a very easy framework with 3 S's: simple, short, and sweet. So doing something that's easy and accessible. It doesn't have to cost money, but maybe it's, making sure that you're eating enough vegetables, drinking an extra glass of water, taking 5 minutes to go outside if the weather is okay. So very simple things that you can do. keeping it short. So maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes that you do, at least once, but maybe a couple times throughout the day. And then something sweet, something that you enjoy so that you want to do it and might even look forward to it throughout your day. And
Yeah.
so I think sometimes self-care feels like this big thing that we have to figure out and find time for, but it can really be made more manageable if we use that little framework, simple, short, and sweet.
Yeah, that's so true. And you know what? Recently, I've also experienced that. You know, like I mentioned before as well, with stress and burnout, it affects everyone, even yoga teachers. I think this was more of a lesson for me. You cannot teach it if you're not practicing it yourself. So it was actually an opportunity for me to take a step back and ask myself, what are you doing? What do you want to achieve from this? And how are you feeling? So that's when I told myself it's okay to say no. You cannot say yes to everything. If you're saying yes to everything, you are going to get overwhelmed. And that's what happened to me. I got overwhelmed. I actually got overwhelmed with so many projects at the same time. And I said, okay, which one would I like to be involved in? So I chose which one I would like to be involved in. And the others, I said, you know what? I'm not the only one that can do it. There's many others that can do it. So give others an opportunity to also do it. So
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, you were able to get clear on those priorities and
exactly.
even reframe what you couldn't do right now as a positive thing, as a way to help
Yes.
other people. I love that.
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes with my personality, I actually feel I can do a lot of things. And I'm sure others also are like that. There's many things that we can do, but we also need to know what do we want to do in order to actually, you cannot do everything at the same time because you are going to get burnt out. And that's what happened to me. I did get burnt out and I took a step
I
back.
have that struggle too. I can relate. It's
Yeah.
so easy to say yes, and then you
Yes.
think back to what it's going to entail, and
Mm.
very quickly it can be too much. Like you're taking on so many more things than maybe you can truly do in the
Yes.
amount of time and energy you have. Yes.
Yeah. So it's also
Yeah.
being kind to yourself, self-love, self-care.
Definitely. Yeah. For me, re-examining those priorities is a continuous process because
Mm.
I'm always thinking about what do I have the time for? What do I have the energy for?
Mhm.
And that's where, prioritizing our self-care becomes important too, because that self-care helps us to recharge and refuel.
Mm.
And I think when we get so busy, we think that we don't even have time to take those breaks. But
Yeah.
that's stepping away gives us that clarity so that we can come back and then the ideas and plans and analysis all just can flood out. And so, I think that really finding that balance is important and continuing to check in with yourself because like we've touched on how our stress is ebbing and flowing and changing so much, your needs and priorities and self-care is always going to be changing too. So staying tuned into yourself is very key.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, we also want to discuss more about mind shift. Maybe can you tell us what is mind shift firstly? Because I know I've been hearing this a lot. I also use it with me as well, but maybe tell our viewers, people that don't know what is mind shift firstly, and how can it be applied to those with busy schedules? Because, especially during this time, like we also discussed, time is one of the major factors.
Sure, yeah. Well, with our mindset is all about how we approach something.
Mm.
So it comes from our beliefs, our experiences, and all of these ideas that we have about how we see ourselves and how we kind of make sense of the world.
Mm.
And so when we are shifting our mindset, we're becoming more aware of our thoughts and our beliefs. And I coming at them with a bit of a curiosity, an investigative perspective. So we might think about, is this belief helping me? Where does this belief come from? And we might find that we have a lot of ideas and beliefs from our past. They can go all the way back to our childhood experiences and how we saw the world as children, how our parents modeled certain behaviors and interactions. And then those patterns get repeated in many cases. So, even as a child, we see our parents doing something over and over and over. We learn that perspective and that view about the world. So when we're making a mindset shift, we first bring that awareness into our beliefs and thoughts and start to question them a little bit. We look at, how it's working in our lives, and then we can decide if it's helping us or not. And if it's not, that could be a place to make a shift. We can think about, how we truly want to be and get to decide that for ourselves. And it's really empowering once we start to practice this and start to make more active choices from a very conscious perspective, because it does take practice and kind of repatterning in our brain, but we are able to change our brain patterns and our ways of thinking. And that's actually one of the ways that yoga is so powerful, because we get to practice when we're on the mat or working with a meditation or breathing practice. We get to examine what's happening and find ways that we can create that repatterning, being mindful of how we want to be, and really stepping into that position that we want to have, making that choice for ourselves. So it's a bit of a consistent process, something that we're always working on, but it can feel impossible when we're in this place of being stuck. And I think it's important to just recognize and realize that really in about every moment, we have that choice of how we want to be, how we want to show up, and how we want to feel, how we can shift our thoughts and our feelings and our mindset to be more aligned with what we want for our future, our goals and our dreams. So it's an empowering practice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually very important. Also, with regards to burnout, especially for leaders in society, how can leaders in the workplace beat burnout?
Yes. Well, I think it's, again, important for leaders to communicate what they are doing for their own self-care, for their boundaries, and really making it a priority, something that's non-negotiable. So I like to encourage people to consider your self-care time as an appointment with yourself. And you want to treat that appointment with yourself just like you would treat an appointment with a coworker or even your boss, if that feels more firm. But, really trying to adhere and stick to these boundaries and let it be known. Show people that, these are my work hours and I will not respond to messages outside of that. Or, tell people this doing for my self-care, and ask, what are you doing for self-care this weekend or whatever it may be. And so really starting to have those conversations and show throughout the company that this is what you are doing, so that that ripple effect can be created. It might start at the top and work its way down and throughout the company, to show people that this is what you are doing to beat burnout. And it will help other people see that these wellness practices are accepted, that you as a company value these things and value your whole life and your whole being beyond just work. Work is one part of our lives, and I think sometimes we forget that. So we want to really work on enhancing and feeling fulfilled in all areas of our life.
So much for that insightful information. It was so knowledgeable and it was so well received by me. And I'm sure our audience will also receive it and implement it in their lives as well, because it's practical as well. Can you also tell us how long have you been practicing yoga, and how has this practice changed your life?
Oh, that's such a big question. I've been practicing for about 10 years, maybe a little over 10 years now even. And yoga has completely changed my life in ways that I could not even have imagined or expected when I first began. I actually began my practice of yoga when I was having some personal health challenges, and I received a diagnosis of a genetic condition, which meant that I had a chronic condition to deal with throughout my life. And it was a bit of a fork in the road moment for me. I realized I could be passive and just kind of wait and watch and see what happened, or I could take control of my health and work on improving my health so that I could be as healthy as possible no matter what. And I didn't really see a downside to that option besides the effort and the learning. So that is, of course, what I went with. And part of taking control of my health was working on exercising and becoming more active. So for me, I needed some low impact movement, and yoga seemed like a good option. So I started for really looking for some physical benefits from the practice to improve my own health, and started to hear these little bits of wisdom that my teachers were integrating into the classes. And at the time, I was in a bit of a difficult period in my life, but these little bits of wisdom really stuck with me and started to serve as affirmations and mantras that I would keep in my head and start repeating throughout the day or when times were difficult. And all of that really set me on a much deeper mental and emotional healing journey. So through yoga, I've been able to do a lot of deeper internal healing. And I have been able to reframe and repattern so many unhealthy, difficult, problematic patterns in my life. And I feel like I've kind of woken up into a fuller, deeper way of living where I feel more connected, more aware, more alert, more clear, and have really connected to a lot of deeper parts of myself. And I'm in this kind of continuous exploration of what that is and what that looks like. But I'm just so much more in tune with myself in new and different ways. And, for me, yoga has been a very deep and fulfilling transformation.
Would you say that yoga is an alternative form of healing and medicine?
Well, for me, it was speaking to my own experience. When I started yoga, my physical health was not very good. And I was able to build and improve my own health with yoga, with being able to manage my stress better, and through changing my eating habits. And so those were my three big types of interventions that I did to work on improving my health. And I was able to find a lot of healing. I was having big pain flare ups and everything before. And just by working on my health personally, I was able to reduce that. And I don't have those situations now. So I think, yoga and improving my eating, improving my health, was a bit of an alternative form of healing. It wasn't some of the traditional medicine and practices that we might look to. And it's interesting. It wasn't like I set out with this plan, but it really just developed over time for me. And I found that as I was feeling better with yoga and healthier eating, I wanted to just continue. And that's where, I developed a regular practice. Instead of going to classes once or twice a week, it became a daily habit for me. And, where wellness and yoga became my lifestyle. And, now I feel like this is just my way of living and being. And so I think it really has had a very huge impact on my life. And, it can be seen as a form of healing for myself and maybe for others who've had similar experiences.
Yeah, very true. It's definitely a journey, and a beautiful journey at that as well.
Yes.
So, considering the high workload involved when creating a business, firstly, what are some of the techniques that can be used daily to create a healthy balance outside of yoga?
Yeah, so I think, really keeping to even some of those strategies we talked about with reducing burnout, staying clear on our priorities, working on our self-care. And it is incorporating a bit of yoga, but reflecting on ourselves, staying tuned in to what we need and how we can adjust our schedule and our lives to fit our needs. I think a lot of times we think we have to adjust ourselves to fit the schedule and all of the circumstances. But if we flip that around and make our well-being the priority, how can we adjust those other things to fit what we need? When we talk about a high workload, it is a bit of yoga, but working on some deep breathing to manage that stress. I really love deep breathing as a wellness tool because breathing is accessible to us anytime, anywhere. And so we can always breathe. We can always pause for a moment and collect ourselves, just take a step back from everything that's going on and maybe physically change your location, whether it's going into a different room or stepping outside for a moment and giving yourself that pause to, literally change your perspective, to breathe, to feel the ground underneath you and remember that you are supported. Coming out of that place of overwhelm and reconnecting to yourself.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. And again, everything that you're saying is actually much needed, and especially during this time, and in fact, anytime, because stress is always going to be there. There will always be challenges, and we need to learn how to deal with this, how to handle it, or else we can kill ourselves earlier with stress.
Definitely. Yeah. The harmful effects of stress, I think, are, often hidden where we don't realize how much the stress is affecting us. Sometimes it's until it's too late.
True.
And so I think we really want to bring in these well-being practices sooner than we think we need, because we don't want to wait until that big catastrophic event happens, and be a little bit more proactive with how we consider our health and wellness.
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. Okay, what has been your biggest challenge as a woman, firstly in business, and how have you used this to strengthen you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the very active world of social media, there's a lot of noise and a lot going on, and it can be easy to get caught up in that. When we see other people doing things, or maybe even portraying yoga and the teachings of yoga in a certain way, it can be easy to think that maybe we're not doing enough, or our perspective isn't the right one, or not good enough in some way. And so I think the challenge for me has been just staying true to myself, continuously developing what that is and staying connected to my inner voice, my authenticity, to even see what that truth is and maybe look at how it's shifting from time to time. But then working on letting that truth be seen and showing up in ways that are authentic and ways that really reflect myself, my beliefs, my values, and how I want to share these teachings of yoga and wellness and the impact I want to have.
Very true. What are the three things that you do on a daily basis to build confidence?
Yeah, for me, again, the tools of yoga are there. So for me, it's, my physical yoga practice, taking time for meditation and journaling to reflect, and also staying aware of my self-talk, my own mindset work, to recognize what is going on in my own head, my own voice, and see if there are some places to adjust or shift, and checking in with my inner voice. Every day it's a matter of, what do I need today? What do I want to give today? And how do I want to be? Maybe there's certain reminders I need to tell myself, or a priority, an intention to set for the day. And so I think for me, the three things to build my confidence do really come from yoga: the meditation, the journaling and reflection, the physical practice, and staying tuned into myself. Even, when we're doing our work and giving, we want to stay connected and grounded within ourselves so that our work and our effort is authentic and true.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful again. I'm actually in awe at the moment because everything that you're saying, it's so much needed right now. And yeah, again, practical ways to implement this in our lives is something to actually think about. We have to take a step back and analyze it, and how we need to accept it first. I mean, receive it and implement it. Could
I'll actually just add too
yeah.
that I think we might not even realize how much self-care can build and affect our confidence.
Mm-hmm.
But when we are taking that time for ourselves, our brain actually sees that we are a priority to ourselves, and it feels good to give ourselves our own time and effort. So self-care is rewarding in ways that send those positive signals to our brain, and we're able to manage our energy better. Another thing I really like about breathing practices is that we're able to control our own energy through our breath work. And so when we realize we can manage our energy, I think that helps us build our confidence as well, because we see that stress doesn't have to affect us in those negative ways. We can walk into a difficult situation and still feel grounded and have a bit more control. Even if we still feel those nerves, we know that we are okay, and we're really cultivating that place of inner safety and security within ourselves. And that helps us be more confident and show up in deeper integrity.
Yeah, very true. So we're actually coming to the end of our show. But before we actually get to the end, there's one question that I normally ask majority of my, or maybe all of my guest speakers, because it's actually quite nice to also learn about how they deal with this situation. Could you give us one or even two pivotal moments that have shaped you in your journey thus far? And what lessons have you learned from those moments?
Well, I think I would say that my big pivotal moment was actually starting yoga, as I described with my story, where, I was very aware of how my journey could change in that moment by just deciding I'm going to be in charge of my health here, and make that decision. And that was a really big moment for me. And it's bigger looking back on it. I think at the time I didn't know how big it was, but the way yoga has impacted my entire life, really showed me some helped me learn some things about myself where I didn't know the depth of my strength. I've heard in classes like, you are stronger than you think you are. And it was like, wow, maybe that is true. I can hold this pose for another breath. And I would see how I could get through those challenging moments and, be able to withstand them. And as I would repeat that, maybe it's holding that pose for another moment, another breath, it was always, that repatterning was happening. And I started to see that I can do this next challenge and it will be okay. And, really helped me cultivate more inner strength and, better understanding of myself.
Yeah.
So I think that entire journey was a really big moment. And, I guess the moment is starting on the journey, really.
Really inspiring. Well, it's actually very inspiring for me as well. What advice can you give to our Mindful Trinity viewers or even our listeners? Because we actually have various platforms such as YouTube video and the different podcast channels.
Yes. Well, my biggest advice would be to make your health and well-being a priority. And there's always those busy periods in life where, it's more difficult to work on our health and well-being, but, try not to let yourself sacrifice your health and well-being to work or to, maybe other people who are asking a lot of you.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen many people this last year or so, taking that time to reflect and also reprioritize what they do. Some people are starting to go back to school or change their careers and, shifting their life in a way to follow their passions and live out their dreams that they've had and maybe put on the back burner for a while. But I think without our health, these things can't even happen. So self-care is a really key element to taking care of yourself, to being in tune with what you need, and just giving yourself your own time, your own energy. You are worth it.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I also do agree. This um, past year, or I think it's a year and a half now, or even going a little bit further than that. It's been a very weird time. It's like bittersweet. Good things have been happening, lots of bad things have been happening. A lot of good people, friends, family have been leaving us, leaving this world. Like you said, career changes, mind shift. It's an opportunity for us to actually take the mind shift and actually grab those opportunities that are born to us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Getting clear on what we want for our life and what we want to do, maybe even what our purpose is and the type of impact we want to have.
Yeah.
And that perspective is wonderful and refreshing. And so we need our health and well-being in good order so that we can live in this deeper, bigger way that we might want to.
Yeah, very true. How can our viewers, the public, actually find you? Social media or any other groups or pages? I know you do have, I think, a group. I'm not sure whether they have two groups. Maybe tell them more about that and how can they find you, even if it's in the real world, even after this whole pandemic is over, and if they want to do any classes with you, just tell us how to get a hold of you.
Yes, absolutely. I do have Facebook group focused on mental wellness and work and life well-being. So I can make that available. I have a Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn, and also my website, which is just my name, CourtneyJohannesen.com. So easy to find me there.
Okay, I'll actually just add all of those links on the show notes, so it'll be easy for them to actually get a hold of you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, awesome. So thank you so much, Courtney, for joining us today and just sharing your knowledge and your insights with us. I think it was absolutely refreshing and much needed. I actually repeated myself many, many times during this discussion because I do agree with you, and there is some sort of alignment between us. Well, it's not just because I'm a yoga teacher, but because I believe in everything that you said. And I know what I went through with stress and all of that, and how yoga has helped me. And I know it can help many others.
Absolutely. So wonderful to connect with you again. And thank you for allowing me to come and share. My
Well, you're
pleasure.
welcome. Again, I'm just so grateful that you accepted my invite. I know it took us a while, but it was well worth it, I think.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay. So to our audience, if I did not introduce myself to you at the beginning of our podcast, I'm Vaishnavi Charan. Sometimes it happens to me. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm sure, well, hopefully you enjoyed this discussion. And if you did resonate with this discussion, please subscribe to our channels, give us a like, give us a share, and invite all of your friends and your family, any like-minded people that are also in the space of healing and advancing and moving forward, while also learning. Yeah, invite them. And also rate us on, if you're on Apple or any other podcast channels, rate us and also leave us a review. With that being said, more people, more like-minded people will be able to share, to actually find this content and share it with their friends and family as well. So thank you once again, and have an awesome day further. Bye.